My name is Frank Thompson, and I need to tell you about the most profound and devastating experience of my life. The day I took LSD for the first and only time in 1973 and discovered that my wife of 15 years had been living a lie that stretched back to before we even met. I was 42 years old, a conservative insurance executive from suburban Cleveland who had never touched an illegal drug in my life when circumstances led me to consume a substance that would strip away every comfortable illusion I had built about my marriage, my family, and the woman I thought I knew better than anyone in the world. What happened during those 12 hours of altered consciousness didn't just change my understanding of psychedelic drugs. It revealed a secret so shocking that it forced me to question everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the nature of identity itself. I had always been the straight-laced type, the kind of man who wore a suit to work every day, mowed his lawn on Saturdays, and attended church with his family on Sundays. My wife Margaret and I had what everyone considered an ideal marriage. We had met in college in 1956, married immediately after graduation, and built a comfortable middle-class life together in the suburbs. Margaret was everything I had ever wanted in a wife. Beautiful, intelligent, devoted to our family, and completely supportive of my career ambitions. She had given up her own professional aspirations to raise our 3 children, and she seemed perfectly content with the traditional role of homemaker and community volunteer that defined most wives of our generation and social class. The only unusual thing about Margaret was her occasional mysterious absences. She would disappear for a few days every couple of months, claiming to be visiting her elderly aunt in Pittsburgh or attending women's church retreats that I was never invited to join. These absences had been happening throughout our entire marriage, and while I sometimes felt a twinge of curiosity about them, I had always trusted Margaret completely and assumed that she needed these periodic escapes from the routine of suburban motherhood. "Every woman needs some time away from her family responsibilities," she would explain when she returned from these trips, always seeming refreshed and somehow more vibrant than when she had left. The events that led to my LSD experience began in the summer of 1973, when our youngest child left for college and Margaret announced that she wanted to take a longer trip than usual, 2 weeks instead of her customary 3 or 4 days. She claimed that her elderly aunt in Pittsburgh was experiencing health problems and needed extended care, but something about her explanation felt different this time. There was an excitement in her voice that didn't match the supposed gravity of a sick relative, and she seemed unusually secretive about the details of her travel plans. "Frank, darling, I just need you to trust me on this," she said when I pressed her for more information. Sometimes a woman has obligations that are difficult to explain to her husband. My decision to follow Margaret on this particular trip was completely out of character for me, driven by a combination of curiosity, suspicion, and the simple fact that I had vacation time available and nothing particular to do with our empty nest. Instead of flying to Pittsburgh as she had claimed, I discovered that Margaret had driven to a remote area in upstate New York, to what appeared to be some kind of rural commune or intentional community. The place was populated by long-haired hippies, alternative lifestyle practitioners, and people who looked nothing like the conservative church ladies I would have expected to find at a women's retreat. The shock of seeing my conventionally dressed, middle-aged wife interacting comfortably with a community of countercultural types was profound enough, but what happened next defied everything I thought I knew about Margaret and her values. As I watched from a distance, hidden in the woods surrounding the commune, I saw her shed her conservative clothing in favor of flowing dresses and peasant skirts, let her carefully styled hair loose and wild, and begin interacting with people who clearly knew her well and had been expecting her arrival. This wasn't a woman visiting strangers. This was someone coming home to a community where she obviously belonged. The most shocking revelation came when I saw Margaret embrace a long-haired man with obvious romantic familiarity, kissing him in a way that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The man appeared to be in his early 30s, significantly younger than Margaret, and their interaction suggested an intimacy that could only have developed over an extended period of time. My wife of 15 years, the mother of my children, the woman who had shared my bed and my life and my dreams, was clearly involved in a romantic relationship with another man. A relationship that had been going on for who knows how long under the cover of her mysterious periodic absences. The emotional impact of witnessing my wife's betrayal was devastating. But what made it even worse was the realization that this couldn't be a recent development. The ease with which she moved through the commune, the familiarity other residents showed toward her, and the obvious comfort she displayed in this alternative environment suggested that she had been living a double life for years, possibly decades. Everything about our marriage that I had considered authentic and loving now appeared to be an elaborate performance designed to maintain her respectable suburban facade while she pursued a completely different life during her periodic disappearances. My first instinct was to confront Margaret immediately, to march into the commune and demand an explanation for what I was witnessing. But something held me back, perhaps cowardice, perhaps curiosity, or perhaps the recognition that I was seeing something so far outside my understanding that I needed to learn more before I could even begin to process what it meant. Instead of confronting her, I retreated to a motel in the nearest town and spent the night trying to figure out what to do with the devastating knowledge I had accidentally acquired. The next morning, driven by a combination of desperation and curiosity, I returned to the area around the commune and encountered a young man who was clearly connected to the community but was taking a walk outside its boundaries. When I explained that I was trying to understand what kind of place this was, he invited me to join him for what he called a journey of consciousness expansion that would help me see reality from a completely different perspective. "Man, you look like you're carrying some heavy energy," he observed with the casual wisdom that seemed to characterize many people of his generation. "Maybe what you need is to expand your awareness beyond the limitations of straight society's programming." Before you continue this incredible journey of consciousness, expansion, and shocking discovery with us, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories about the hidden truths that psychedelic experiences can reveal, and the couples who discovered that love sometimes requires seeing beyond the illusions we create about each other. The decision to take LSD was the most impulsive and uncharacteristic choice I had ever made in my conservative, carefully planned life. Everything about my upbringing, my profession, and my social position had taught me to avoid illegal drugs and the people who used them. But seeing Margaret's secret life had shattered so many of my assumptions about reality that I felt desperate for any perspective that might help me understand what was happening. If my wife can live a completely different life than the one I thought I knew, I reasoned, maybe I need to see the world through completely different eyes. The young man, who introduced himself as Rainbow, a name that would have seemed ridiculous to me under normal circumstances, was surprisingly knowledgeable about psychedelic substances and their effects on consciousness. He explained that LSD could dissolve the mental barriers that prevented people from seeing truth clearly, that it could reveal hidden aspects of reality that were normally invisible to conventional awareness. The thing about acid, he told me as we sat by a stream near the commune, is that it shows you what's really there instead of what you think should be there. It strips away all the stories and assumptions and social programming that keep you from seeing clearly. The substance itself was contained on a small piece of paper that looked completely innocuous, nothing like the dangerous drug I had been conditioned to fear through years of anti-drug propaganda and law enforcement warnings. Rainbow explained that the dose was moderate, designed to provide insight and expanded awareness without overwhelming someone who had never experienced altered consciousness before. "This isn't about getting high or escaping reality," he assured me. "This is about seeing reality more clearly than you've ever seen it before. But you have to be prepared for the possibility that what you see might be very different from what you expect." As I placed the small piece of paper on my tongue and felt it dissolve, I had no idea that I was about to embark on the most revealing and transformative experience of my adult life. The LSD would not only show me hidden aspects of my wife's secret life, but would force me to confront uncomfortable truths about my own assumptions, limitations, and the ways that conventional social conditioning had prevented me from seeing the people I loved most clearly. The journey I was beginning would ultimately teach me that love sometimes requires the courage to see beyond the comfortable illusions we create about each other, even when that vision is more complex and challenging than anything we had imagined. The onset of the LSD experience was gradual and subtle at first, beginning about an hour after I had consumed the paper tab with what felt like a gentle shift in my perception of colors and sounds. The forest around me seemed more vivid and alive than I had ever noticed before, with individual leaves appearing to contain infinite complexity, and the sound of the nearby stream, revealing layers of rhythm and melody that I had never heard. But the real transformation began when the psychological effects started to manifest, dissolving the mental barriers that had kept me from seeing my marriage and my wife clearly for the past 15 years. As the drug's effects intensified, I found myself experiencing what Rainbow had described as ego dissolution, the temporary breakdown of the mental structures that normally organized my thoughts and perceptions according to social expectations and personal conditioning. Instead of seeing the world through the filter of a conservative insurance executive who expected his wife to conform to traditional roles and behaviors, I began to perceive reality with a clarity that was both liberating and terrifying. The comfortable assumptions that had shaped my understanding of marriage, family, and personal identity began to crumble, replaced by direct perception that revealed truths I had been unconsciously avoiding for years. The most profound revelation came when I began to remember details about Margaret's behavior throughout our marriage that I had previously ignored or explained away. Under the influence of LSD, patterns that had been invisible to my conventional awareness became glaringly obvious. The timing of her mysterious absences always coincided with periods when she seemed restless or dissatisfied with our domestic routine. The books she read, the music she listened to when she thought I wasn't paying attention, and the way she sometimes stared out the window with an expression of longing. All of these suddenly made sense as expressions of an inner life that was far more complex and rebellious than the suburban housewife persona she maintained for my benefit and social appearances. The psychedelic state allowed me to see that Margaret's secret life wasn't just about an extramarital affair. It represented a fundamental aspect of her identity that she had been forced to hide because of social expectations and my own narrow understanding of who she was supposed to be. The conservative, religious, family-oriented woman I had married was real, but she was only one dimension of a person who also contained wild, creative, spiritual, and sexually liberated aspects that had no place in our conventional suburban existence. The commune wasn't just where she went to have an affair, it was where she went to be her complete self without having to perform the limited role that marriage and motherhood had assigned to her. Under the influence of the drug, I began to experience what felt like telepathic connection with Margaret, seeing our relationship from her perspective for the first time in our 15 years together. I could feel her frustration with the constraints of traditional marriage, her love for me combined with her resentment of the ways I had unconsciously limited her possibilities for growth and self-expression. The periodic absences weren't betrayals of our marriage, they were her way of maintaining enough connection with her authentic self to be able to continue playing the role of conventional wife and mother that kept our family stable and socially acceptable. The emotional impact of these realizations was overwhelming, as I experienced simultaneously the pain of betrayal and the recognition that I had been complicit in creating conditions that made her deception necessary. My expectations of what a wife should be had been so narrow and rigid that Margaret had been forced to compartmentalize her identity, expressing different aspects of herself in different contexts, because no single relationship or community could accommodate her full complexity. The LSD showed me that what I had interpreted as betrayal was actually a survival strategy that had allowed her to maintain both her marriage and her sanity. As the psychedelic experience deepened, I found myself reliving scenes from our courtship and early marriage with enhanced perception that revealed layers of meaning I had completely missed at the time. Margaret's occasional comments about feeling trapped or limited, her wistful expressions when she talked about friends who had chosen more unconventional lifestyles, her subtle attempts to introduce alternative ideas into our conversations, all of these had been signals that she was struggling with the constraints of the role I expected her to play. My love for her had been genuine but possessive, appreciating her beauty and intelligence while unconsciously demanding that she suppress any aspects of her personality that didn't fit my image of an ideal wife. The revelation that was most painful and most transformative came when I realized that Margaret had been protecting me from knowledge that would have challenged my comfortable worldview and social position. She understood that discovering her involvement with the counterculture community would threaten my conservative identity and professional reputation, so she had constructed an elaborate system of lies and omissions to preserve both her own authenticity and my ignorance. Her deception was an act of love as much as it was an act of self-preservation, designed to allow both of us to maintain the lives we thought we wanted without forcing a confrontation that might have destroyed our family. The psychedelic state also revealed that Margaret's younger lover at the commune represented not just sexual adventure, but intellectual and spiritual connection that was missing from our marriage. In my conventional role as breadwinner and family patriarch, I had never encouraged or supported Margaret's interests in alternative spirituality, artistic expression, or political consciousness that were clearly important aspects of her identity. The man she was involved with appreciated and celebrated dimensions of her personality that I had either ignored or actively discouraged, providing the kind of complete acceptance that every human being needs, but that traditional marriage roles often make impossible. As the LSD experience continued, I began to understand that the choice facing me was not simply whether to forgive Margaret's affair or end our marriage, but whether I was capable of expanding my understanding of love and identity enough to accommodate her full complexity as a human being. The drug had shown me that conventional marriage, as I had understood and practiced it, was a kind of mutual imprisonment that required both partners to suppress essential aspects of themselves in order to maintain social respectability and domestic stability. The most challenging revelation was that Margaret's secret life had actually made her a better wife and mother by providing outlets for aspects of her personality that would have otherwise created tension and dissatisfaction within our family. The creative energy, spiritual exploration, and sexual liberation she experienced at the commune allowed her to return home refreshed and capable of maintaining the domestic tranquility that had characterized our marriage. Her periodic escapes to authenticity had paradoxically preserved the conventional life that I valued, even though I had been completely unaware of the psychological and emotional costs she was paying to maintain it. The LSD also showed me that my own identity as a conservative businessman and family man was just as much a performance as Margaret's role as traditional housewife, and that both of us had been trapped by social expectations that prevented us from exploring our full potential as human beings. The drug revealed aspects of my own personality that I had suppressed in order to conform to masculine ideals and professional requirements. Creativity, sensitivity, spiritual curiosity, and emotional depth that had no place in the corporate world or suburban social circles where I had built my identity and career. By the time the psychedelic effects began to subside, I had experienced a complete transformation in my understanding of marriage, identity, and the nature of authentic love. The revelation of Margaret's 20-year secret had initially felt like the destruction of everything I valued about our relationship, but the LSD had shown me that it actually represented an opportunity to build something more honest, more complete, and more genuinely loving than what we had shared before. The question was whether I had the courage to act on these insights and create space for both of us to be authentic within our marriage, or whether I would retreat into conventional expectations and lose the chance for deeper connection that this crisis had revealed. The final hours of my LSD experience were marked by profound integration of everything I had learned about Margaret, our marriage, and the nature of authentic love, as the drug's effects gradually subsided, and I began to contemplate how to translate these insights into practical action. The return to normal consciousness was gentle but irreversible. I could never again see my wife or our relationship through the narrow lens of conventional expectations that had previously defined my understanding of marriage and family life. The walk back to my motel was a journey through two different worlds, as I moved from the expanded awareness of the psychedelic state back into the ordinary reality where I would have to make concrete decisions about my marriage and my future. Every step brought me closer to the moment when I would have to choose between retreating into comfortable illusions about traditional marriage or embracing the challenging but potentially transformative truth that the LSD had revealed about Margaret's complete identity and authentic needs. The decision about how to confront Margaret with my newfound knowledge was one of the most difficult I had ever faced, requiring me to balance my hurt and anger about her deception with my deeper understanding of why that deception had been necessary. The conventional response would have been to demand explanations, issue ultimatums, and insist that she choose between her secret life and our marriage. But the psychedelic experience had shown me that such an approach would only recreate the conditions that had made her double life necessary in the first place. Instead, I chose to return home and wait for Margaret to complete her 2-week trip to the commune, using that time to process my experience and prepare for a conversation that would fundamentally transform our relationship. The days that followed were among the most introspective of my life, as I examined not only Margaret's deceptions, but my own role in creating a marriage that had required those deceptions to survive. I began to see that my expectations of her as a wife had been based on social conditioning rather than genuine understanding of who she was as a complete human being. The reunion with Margaret when she returned from her trip was emotionally complex, as I struggled to act normally while processing the enormous gulf between the woman I had thought I married and the person I now knew her to be. She seemed more relaxed and vibrant than usual after her time at the commune, radiating an energy and confidence that I had previously attributed to rest and relaxation, but now understood as the result of being able to express her authentic self without constraint or judgment. The conversation in which I revealed my knowledge of her secret life was one of the most honest and vulnerable exchanges of our entire marriage. Margaret's initial reaction was a mixture of shock, fear, and defensive anger, as she anticipated the kind of confrontation that would force her to choose between the different aspects of her identity. "Frank, I can explain everything," she began, falling back on the same kind of rationalizations she had used for 20 years to maintain her double life. "Margaret," I interrupted gently, "I don't need explanations or apologies. I need to understand how we can build a marriage that has room for all of who you are instead of forcing you to hide essential parts of yourself." The look of amazement and relief that crossed her face was one of the most beautiful things I had ever seen, as she realized that my discovery of her secret had led not to judgment and ultimatums, but to a deeper desire for authentic connection. The conversation that followed lasted through the night and into the next morning, as Margaret shared details about her involvement with the commune, her relationship with the younger man, and the internal struggle she had experienced for 20 years between her love for me and our family and her need for creative and spiritual expression that our conventional life couldn't accommodate. "Frank, I never wanted to hurt you," she said, through tears of relief and regret, "but I couldn't figure out how to be a good wife and mother while also being true to the parts of myself that didn't fit into suburban respectability." My response surprised both of us with its calmness and acceptance. "Margaret, the LSD showed me that love isn't about owning someone or limiting them to roles that make us comfortable. Real love means supporting each other's complete authentic expression, even when that challenges our assumptions about how relationships should work. If your connection with the commune and your friend there helps you be more completely yourself, then maybe that's something our marriage should include rather than something you have to hide from me." The negotiation of new terms for our marriage was challenging, but ultimately liberating for both of us, as we worked together to create a relationship structure that could accommodate Margaret's need for periodic escapes to the commune, while maintaining the family stability and emotional connection that we both valued. We agreed that her absences would be acknowledged honestly rather than disguised as visits to sick relatives, and that I would work to understand and support her alternative interests rather than ignoring or discouraging them. The most difficult aspect of our new arrangement was dealing with Margaret's relationship with her younger lover at the commune, which represented not just sexual adventure, but emotional and intellectual connection that challenged my conventional understanding of marriage and fidelity. The LSD experience had shown me that attempting to control or eliminate this relationship would only recreate the conditions that had made deception necessary, but accepting it required me to expand my definition of love beyond exclusive possession. "Frank, what I have with David at the commune is real and important," Margaret explained during one of our many conversations about the new structure of our marriage, "but it's not a replacement for what we have together. It's a different kind of connection that feeds a different part of my soul. If you can accept that I need both relationships to be complete, then maybe we can create something more honest and sustainable than the marriage we've had for the past 20 years. The personal growth that both Margaret and I experienced as we worked to implement our new understanding of marriage was profound and unexpected. I began exploring interests and aspects of my personality that I had suppressed in order to conform to masculine and professional expectations, while Margaret was able to integrate her alternative interests into our daily life rather than compartmentalizing them into secret escapes. Our conversations became deeper and more authentic as we both felt permission to express thoughts and feelings that had previously been off-limits. The reaction of our adult children to the changes in our marriage was mixed but ultimately accepting, as they recognized that their parents had become more honest and vital in their relationship with each other. Our youngest daughter, who was home from college during the transition period, observed that we seemed more like complete people and less like actors playing predetermined roles. "You and Mom are more interesting now," she told me during one of our conversations. "It's like you're both finally being yourselves instead of just being married people." The community response to our unconventional marriage arrangement was predictably negative from conservative neighbors and church members who couldn't understand or accept our rejection of traditional monogamy. But we also found support from other couples who were quietly struggling with similar issues and were inspired by our willingness to prioritize authentic love over social conformity. The experience taught us that many apparently conventional marriages contained hidden tensions and unmet needs that were being managed through various forms of deception and compromise. The long-term success of our restructured marriage required ongoing communication, negotiation, and mutual support as we navigated the practical and emotional challenges of loving someone completely, while accepting that complete love sometimes means sharing that person with others who serve different aspects of their authentic self. Margaret continued her periodic visits to the commune, but now they were acknowledged and supported rather than hidden and defended through elaborate lies. The most surprising outcome of the entire experience was that my own involvement with the commune community, initially motivated by curiosity about Margaret's secret life, evolved into genuine appreciation for the alternative values and lifestyle practices that I had previously dismissed as irresponsible hippie nonsense. I began to understand that the counterculture movement contained valid critiques of conventional society and practical alternatives to traditional ways of organizing relationships, work, and community life. Looking back on that transformative LSD experience in 1973, I understand that discovering Margaret's 20-year secret was ultimately a gift that forced both of us to examine the assumptions and limitations that had constrained our love for each other. The psychedelic drug didn't create the problems in our marriage. It revealed them in ways that made healing and growth possible. The conventional marriage we had maintained for 15 years had been based on performance and limitation rather than authentic acceptance and support. The lesson I learned from trying LSD once and discovering my wife's secret was that love requires the courage to see each other clearly, without the filters of social expectation and personal conditioning that prevent us from appreciating the full complexity of the people we claim to care about most. True intimacy is impossible when partners are required to hide essential aspects of themselves in order to maintain relationships that serve social appearances rather than authentic connection. Margaret and I remained married for another 30 years after that pivotal experience, but it was a completely different kind of marriage, one based on honest communication, mutual support for each other's complete authenticity, and shared commitment to growing as individuals while maintaining our connection as partners. The secret that had nearly destroyed our relationship ultimately became the foundation for building something stronger, more flexible, and more genuinely loving than either of us had previously imagined possible.